Have you been wanting to make an impact and you've been considering mission trips? Maybe a short-term mission trip brought by your church or by your school, but you don't really know if you should take a part? Do short-term mission trips matter? Well, today we're going to talk about that. Welcome to Tiny Chair Talks, where we have big conversations in tiny chairs. Today we have with us a very special guest, Mrs. Sonya Reaves. How are you?
Sorry, it's singular. I'm single.
Oh,
Miss.
Sorry, my bad.
It's
Miss
okay.
Sonya Reaves. I think I've been saying Mrs. a lot, and so it just naturally comes out.
Fine. I just wanted to, in case there's any single men watching.
Okay, well, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. So tell us, what do you do?
So I have several different jobs currently. I am part-time at Southern Adventist University, where I help organize short-term mission trips, which in this situation, short-term would be considered anything 2 weeks or less. And I also am getting my master's degree in international community development. And I am also part-time children's ministry director at the Well, which is a church downtown.
Wow, that's awesome. Congrats.
Thanks.
Yeah, so tell us, how many mission trips have you been on?
It's a tricky question because I worked for almost 4 years in Cambodia just up until the pandemic, where I was working for a nonprofit organization based out of Australia, where I was actually the host organization. So I was the person people would come to, and I worked alongside my Cambodian coworkers to help guide people on a mission trip and take them on that journey. So a lot.
Yeah, so what kind of guidance does a person need to go on a mission trip?
Yeah, great question. So before someone goes on a mission trip, it's not just showing up at the airport, going on it, building a church or painting a church, and then coming home. It should be more than that. When you go on a short-term mission trip, you should take the time to learn about the culture ahead of time. You should be learning what it means to help without hurting. Not all aid is good aid. The Bible talks about you should have more than just a good heart to do the things. It's not enough just to want to help. You should make sure you're helping without hurting. And going on this journey, you should be willing to invest and work alongside your community that you're in. So you should be, like I said, learning about the culture before you go, finding out what the organization you go and partner with, what do they do, how can you help them, how can you just go into that community and learn.
Yeah, I like that a lot. We have to make an intentional effort to get to know the people.
Yeah.
So does that mean that mission trips can only happen outside of one's culture?
No, and also great question. So a short-term mission trip should really be anywhere and everywhere. You don't need to be a certain age. You don't need to necessarily have a certain background. You can be more than just a medical person. It should be more than necessarily just building something or maybe painting. You should be going into a location, whether it's here in your town or over in a different country. You should be going somewhere where you can learn from the people and ask them, what does Jesus look like here? How do you see Jesus in your community? So you're going with an open heart to learn and not to save them, because that's not our job to save them. Our job is to go and work alongside them. And that's what Jesus had the disciples do. They worked alongside the people. They talked about Jesus and about God, but they worked alongside the people.
That's really interesting. Have you ever noticed someone who has gone on a mission trip without the desire to serve or to work?
Yeah, so I've definitely seen a wide variety of people on mission trips, especially because I was the host organization. We had people come over to Cambodia who didn't even know a word of the local language. They didn't even know the history of Cambodia, that there had been a genocide, the Khmer Rouge coming through. They knew nothing about it, and they were never really willing to leave their comfort zone. And so the first thing you should do when you plan on going on any form of a trip or service project, whether local or global, is you should be learning about the organization, the culture, and figuring out how can you serve and how can you learn alongside.
Yeah. The comfort zone thing is really serious. I've dealt that before going on trips.
Yeah.
How can someone break out of their comfort zone?
So it has to be in a safe environment, which is why it's important for your organization you're going with, your church, your school, to invest in the group ahead of time, so that way you know that you're in a safe place. You shouldn't just meet everybody for the first time at the airport. You should be working together to build relationships ahead of time, because you need to be in a safe environment as you are confronted with reality of the world around you, understanding that, oh, America's not the best country sometimes. We send our trash to these countries to rot. And understanding that as you go through this, we need to be together and in a safe environment, so together we can talk about this, and together we can learn a better way of living and a better way of life. So when you go out of your comfort zone, if you're in a safe space, you'll thrive more. So that way, before you go, you're together learning about each other. You go on your trip, it's hard, it's scary, you're out of your comfort zone, but you're in a safe place with safe people. And then when you come back, you're in a safe group, so you can process, understand what happened, and talk about how you're going to be different going forward and how you're going to let that experience change you.
I like that there's a long-term effect with the trip.
A short-term mission trip, short-term is a silly term, because yes, you're on the ground for a week, 2 weeks, but it should be a lifelong change leading up, going, and coming back.
Yeah. So what does it do for a person to go on these trips and then arrive back home? Is there a new sense of awareness or a new view at their own life?
Yeah, so technically, if done well, and that's what we'll just assume everyone's doing it correctly, a student or a person, participant, is going to go on this trip, and their worldview is going to be challenged, because we grow up in a bubble, no matter what culture it is, Seventh-day Adventist tradition or not, you grow up in a bubble where this is your norm. And this perchance could be the first time you're going outside of your comfort zone and you're seeing a world around you that maybe isn't what you've seen in mainstream media. Maybe it isn't what your parents have told you the rest of the world looks like. Maybe it's the opposite, or it's just new. And so you're going to have your view challenged. You're going to see that you're not necessarily the center of the universe. Your culture is not the number one culture. And so you're going to have all these things challenged, and often when you come back from a short-term mission, then you're trying to reconfigure and be like, where do I exist in this world? How should I exist? Maybe things you saw challenged you. You saw poverty. You saw living conditions that you're not used to or comfortable with. And so you're going to be challenged to perhaps, hopefully, live differently. Maybe you're going to recycle better, or maybe you're going to support a nonprofit organization that's going to help fight sex trafficking, or different things like that. So when done well, you should have a very big challenge in your life, a chaotic event that makes you think differently, and then you're going to hopefully process that and continue to think bigger picture.
That's so good. I like that it can be done well, and there's moments where sometimes it's not done well. Yeah. I want to know more about sharing of Christ at another country. What is that like? You know, sometimes we think of sharing Jesus as just preaching. You talked a bit about it already, but could you detail some more of maybe a story or a circumstance that you've seen someone get to know Christ outside of a sermon?
Yeah. So one of the good things about short-term missions is it's a bit of what I call co-powerment. It's both sides benefiting, both sides being empowered to do things differently. So if you look through the stories of Jesus, he's not necessarily always preaching the Beatitudes on a hill. He's healing people, he's working with them, he's teaching them how to live differently. And so that's what a short-term mission trip is. It's being the hands and feet of Jesus. It's going and working alongside people. And then it's what I like to call friendship evangelism, and it's just becoming friends with someone. The way that Southern Adventist University does short-term missions is they build relationships and partnerships, so they return year after year after year to the same location, working with the same organization. So we go in and partner with these organizations to help them share the gospel, And then we go in and follow up to bring in a little burst of energy as they share the gospel, or maybe we do a quick VBS to bring new people in, and then this organization, church, school, whatever it is, will follow up and continue to do that. So you're talking about Jesus maybe with the community, but you're also talking about Jesus in your own group that's going on this short-term mission trip. And oftentimes within that small group, there's maybe an awakening with Jesus and being like, oh, this is what he's calling me to do and how he wants me to be different. And so both sides can learn about Jesus and should be learning about Jesus.
That's powerful. I appreciate that. And how should a person know it's time for them to go on a mission trip?
It's always time to go on a mission trip. Like you said, you don't have to go overseas. You don't have to go far away. If anything, with the way that short-term missions are run, you can do it here in your community. You can go work at a local summer camp for the summer and consider that a short-term mission trip. It can be anywhere. And Southern Adventist University's motto for this department when we run our mission trips is every major has a mission. Everybody has a calling to serve. Everybody has a calling to work for Jesus. You don't have to be a career missionary. You don't have to be medical, but you can be serving. You can be involved in your local community, and you can be purposefully putting on events and doing things like that here in America or outside of America.
Yeah. What do you tell somebody who feels like they don't have a calling? Maybe they look at their life and they say, I don't have any talents. I don't have anything to offer if I were to go on a mission trip. What do you say?
Man, first I want to give that person a big hug because it's not true. Every person has gifts and talents and things that make them incredibly unique and that they can offer that I can't offer, you can't offer, because God has made them incredibly special. If they don't know what their calling is, that's fine, but what makes you excited? What do you get passionate about? When I talk with students, I ask them, what class are you in right now that makes you really excited? It might not even have to do with their major, but they love what they're learning and they want to talk about it. That can be what you share. That's how you can talk to other people and share information, and then through that, that can be part of your mission. You don't have to have a calling per se, but what is it that God put inside you that makes you excited? What did God put inside you that you could talk about without stopping ever? Is it books? Is it movies? Is it cars? Whatever it is, use that. Talk about it. Build friendships and introduce them to Jesus that way.
That's great. And how exciting is a mission trip? You know, maybe there's someone who's like, I don't want to travel so far. I don't want to deal with staying outside of my home. Is it an exciting thing?
Okay, I love traveling and living internationally. I've lived in lots of different countries for extended periods of time. I personally love it and get a thrill from the unknown. It's not necessarily for everybody, but they can still be involved in a short-term mission trip because it's a partnership. The people who go and do the work, the people who help support and fund the work, the people who pray for the work. So everybody can be involved, but I challenge everybody to go on at least 2 short-term mission trips to experience a world outside their own. It will change the way they think, it'll change the way they know their neighbor, the way they interact with their neighbor, and it will benefit not only themselves, but their local church.
And how about for the person who says, I need to go to a particular place. I won't go on a mission trip unless it's to this country or unless it's to this region. Do you think there should be a sense of open-mindedness when we go on a mission trip?
I think that's looking more at the personality of a person, maybe. I think God maybe has put a country on someone's heart. Maybe they heard a story when they were a child about a culture, and that has been one that they've always wanted to go and work among. I think with anything in life, it's okay to have ideas, but you should always remain a little bit open to the Holy Spirit working in your heart to say, actually, you should be going this direction, not this direction. And if you can have that openness, then God can send you anywhere and use you anyway. Otherwise, you're trying to put him in a box. So both are okay, but we should always, always be open to the Spirit.
Yeah, and I've heard stories of people who have been preparing to go to a particular place, and last minute they end up somewhere else, but it was the blessing that they needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so who benefits from a mission trip?
Yeah, if and when, again, we're assuming people are doing it perfectly, that a short-term mission trip is done well, everybody benefits. You're going to be bringing in some extra energy to your host organization, that church, that school, that nonprofit, and you're going to be bringing in that energy to do a project that maybe would take them too long or would take them forever to finish. So they're going to benefit because they're going to be blessed by you praying for them, serving them, coming alongside them. Your host country and culture are going to benefit because you're helping that organization do their work and they're serving Jesus. And then you're going to be blessed as the participant because you have allowed God to use you as his hands and feet, and you have learned a new everything around you. So really, when everything is done well, it's a win-win-win-win for everyone.
That's good. And what kind of needs do hosts require, or what do they ask for when they want missionaries to come by?
Yeah, when you have a host organization who wants to partner with a church here in the States or maybe a school, they have lots of different needs. Everything from your classic putting on a VBS so they can bring in new interest into their organization, or maybe it's doing a week of prayer in the local school, medical clinics that need to be done. You can have the possibilities are endless. And when we create our short-term trips at Southern Adventist University, we look for gifts that our students have. So do we want to do a computer clinic? We've had kids go down to South America and do a clinic just like you would run a medical clinic, but it's for their computers. You can do English classes. You can do, really think outside the box and how can you serve and work alongside an organization? And depends on what they need and what they do. Maybe it's a school and they just need a fresh coat of paint put on everything in the mornings, and in the afternoons you do sports clinic. Who knows? The possibilities are endless.
Yeah, but how soon can you see the results of a trip? If we're talking about short-term mission trips, maybe it's a week, maybe it's 2. Do results come during that time period, or does it exist at a later moment?
Depends on what results you're looking for. You should never expect anything to be miraculously changed, because it's not about us and not about necessarily what we do. It's about God and the bigger picture. When you look here locally in our own backyard, do we see things happen overnight? Do we always see people come to Christ after their first interaction? Right. No, it takes a time. You have to build that relationship. So you'll see different kinds of results. You might see an increase in interest after doing a VBS or something like that. You'll see maybe people having access to clean water if you've come and done a water filtration. But you have to monitor and assess long term. And that also helps shape what kind of trip you're going to do, because your host organization should be monitoring those things, and they should know where their needs are. And so you can always come back every year and watch those things change and the community be different.
Yeah, how about for the person who has gone on the trip, but they didn't really feel like it was a crazy spiritual time, or they didn't feel like it was an experience that changed their life? Yeah. Are they in the wrong? What should they do if they feel that way?
I'm glad you've asked this, because that's important for me to remember, that every trip isn't a life-changing experience for a participant. You have some students or some participants who maybe just weren't in a position in their life for growth or for change, and that's okay. You can't force anything to happen in a life. You can't expect certain things to always happen, because you have to be open. It may be that they just weren't in a place in their life where they needed to change or they wanted to change. They maybe need to ask themselves, have I been open to the Holy Spirit nudging me to learn new things? Did they get out of their comfort zone? Or did they stay with their mates the whole time and just hang out in the back and not introduce themselves to local community? When you go on a short-term mission trip, you need to be willing to challenge yourself. And what does that look like to you? I don't know. But does it mean you need to get out of your comfort zone in order to have an experience? Yes.
Yeah.
So you need to go in with some intentionality, it's okay if you don't change your career path because you didn't learn something new or it wasn't a spiritual high. That's okay. But did you learn something? And through the process of working with your group, you should be able to reflect back and identify things you at least learned, whether you knew it or not at the time.
Yeah. And you mentioned the Holy Spirit. I'm curious to know, how much of a spiritual effort is a mission trip? Is it deeper than physical labor? Is it deeper than changing your mentality? Is there a spiritual component to a mission trip too?
Yes, for sure. You're building this short-term mission trip family, so to speak. And as you are with any family, you want to talk about God and look for him and seek him, specifically because you're going through this event that maybe is a bit crazy. So in those mornings, you should be having devotional time, quiet time. In those evenings, you should be having reflection time and asking God daily, how can you show me you? How can I see you in this community? Especially because even in America, we worship differently in the South than we do maybe in the North. It's cold up there. Maybe they don't want to go outside as much and worship. We all worship differently. God created us to be different. So how can I go to a community and learn what Jesus looks like for them? And so that's the Spirit working in you to be like, oh, maybe I could worship differently than how I was raised. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
I feel like it's a little bit
No, that's good.
vague.
No, I really appreciate that. I think it says a lot about how much we can't do it on our own.
Yeah. And that's the intentionality. With a short-term mission trip, you should never willy-nilly do these things. You can't just rock up to the airport and be like, I'm here. There has to be such intentionality put into it from your sponsors who are leading the trip, to the students, to the parents who are sending their kids on the trip. There should be prayer put into it. There should be research put into it, and training to help prepare the kids and the participants to have their hearts opened and to know how to seek God daily, to say, I'm here, teach me, show me. Because that's not necessarily something we do daily, because we're not always in that crazy kind of an environment or outside of our comfort zone.
Yeah.
But it should be done with such intentionality because the results will be beautiful. Reconciliation can happen through short-term mission trips. You can have someone understand that it's okay to not speak English or different things like that. Their world will just, when done well, can be changed through the Holy Spirit showing them that we're not the only ones out there.
That's powerful. I love that. I appreciate you saying that. I'm wondering about the fears that might come with a mission trip. I think about the COVID-19 pandemic. Maybe that changed the dynamic of people going on mission trips. Can you talk about fears a person might have?
Yeah. Fears, I think, are valid, and we need to acknowledge them because they're not wrong. We need to understand why we have a fear about it, because you can have a fear of going to a country even before the pandemic because you don't know how they react or you have an assumption about them. So you need to be able to address those fears and those concerns. When you travel to another country, there are vaccinations you have to have, even before the pandemic. Mumps, smallpox, all the hepatitis shots. You have to have those in order to protect the local country and protect yourself. So, there's things to be aware of. There's countries now that require you to have the COVID-19 vaccine as a precaution for their people as well as for you. So that's something you're going to have to look into and be aware of. And you should be generous and okay with those feelings. Whether you have a fear of the vaccine or not, you should be respectful of the requests of the country. And being safe and healthy is a thing that you should be aware of as well. If anything, maybe this will help all of us understand, we should be washing our hands more. We've not been doing it our whole lives. We've been doing it wrong. So you can identify those fears and see what it is. And if you're uncertain about being safe and protected while on a short-term mission trip, that's okay to not go yet. Stay in the continental United States. there is so much work that needs to be done here as well as overseas. So figure out what that is, and find a way to work within that safety feeling. Because like we said earlier, you have to feel safe. And if you can't feel safe, then you're not going to be open and ready to be led by the Spirit.
Yeah, it jeopardizes the trip.
Yeah, it jeopardizes lots of things. And you know, the host organization may have concerns and fears, so that's why they may be asking you to wear a mask the entire time. And you have to be either okay with that or not. And so you need to address that and figure out where you stand on things and how you can support. And what's the priority? Do you want to, you know, serve Jesus or think about your own wants and needs?
Yeah.
Which, you know, I don't know what that may be. It's up to each person, but
it has to be deeper than ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us, how can someone go on a short-term mission trip?
Yeah, there's loads of ways. I know that there's lots of organizations through our church that has it, as in the global church. There's ADRA, they have trips. I don't know if they're started back up normal yet, but they have trips you can go on. Maranatha has trips you can go on. I would personally recommend, and I obviously have my own opinions on lots of things, but I would personally recommend working with your local church or your local school to go on it, because like I've been saying, there's preparation that needs to happen before, during, and after. And if you go with a bigger organization, you might not have that opportunity to build that safety of your community. And so if you can work with your local pastor, work with your school to develop it, reach out to me. I have plenty of information I can share, and make your own, work on your own. And there's books you can read on how to plan them, on how to do them well, so you do help without hurting, which is actually the name of a book, Helping Without Hurting. And there's lots of ways you can do them and do it safely.
Is it expensive to go on a mission trip?
So God has 1,000 cattle on a hill. I don't know if you knew that. And if he has called you to serve, he can sell one of those cows and you can go on that trip. So yes and no.
Yeah.
It's money, yes, but it's people working together to serve a community and to help. And so if God has called you, who are we to say no?
Yeah, I've heard it say, like, if it's his will, it's his bill. So I really like what you said, because it ties into that.
Yeah. I mean, God has 1,000 cattle on a hill. Fundraising is a ministry. It's inviting people to partner, because not everyone can go. Your great Aunt Bertha maybe can't go serve on a trip, but she can serve on a trip by supporting and being a partnership with you.
Yeah, that's perfect. I'd like to ask you one last question.
Sure.
And I'm wondering, how does God challenge us to serve our communities?
Our local community?
Yeah, our local community, or outside of us too.
He definitely calls us to connect with everyone, whether it's inside our church or outside our church. And he calls us to be ourselves, our authentic person, who we are. And by doing that, we should be making friends with everyone. Friendship evangelism should be a part of our everyday life. You may work and live inside the Seventh-day Adventist bubble, but that's not necessarily the only place he has called us. By making someone's day at the grocery store, by meeting your neighbor who maybe isn't part of our community of faith. That's how he's challenging us and calling us, because every major has a mission, and it's not every major has an overseas mission. It's every major has a mission here and there.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Sonya, for sharing with us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah. And we'll share to you at this moment, if you're thinking about going on a short-term mission trip, go for it. It's an opportunity for you to follow how God is challenging you to serve a community, to be a blessing for others, and to receive a blessing yourself. We want to thank you for joining us here at Tiny Chair Talks, where we have big conversations in tiny chairs. We'll see you next time. Hey, thank you so much for watching this video. We want to encourage you to like it, subscribe, and share it with someone so more people can benefit from Tiny Chair Talks.